country, especially after the pandemic. And actually, that's one of the issues that we will be discussing this afternoon. Earlier also, we showed the house rules. Ja, maybe you can flash it now. Just so to remind our participants that this activity is a safe and brave space for all. So let us be respectful at all times. Uh, we acknowledge that we all have differences in opinions, but we all have to respect that. But we do not tolerate derogatory language and gestures pertaining to religion, race, culture, gender, and sexual orientation, among others. Uh, Please be free to use the chat box to share your opinions, but we will debate later about it. We have differences in opinion, so let's respect that. Um, Also, do not assume anyone's identity with regards to gender, sexual orientation, race, etc. You may ask for someone's preferred pronouns uh, if you must, or if you want to use gender neutral pronouns. We also encourage everyone to respect the privacy of others. Can you have the so if you want to take photos of the participants, you should have to ask for consent first. Yeah, so um, for documentation purposes, we are archiving and we are recording the online session, and at the same time, the webinar is also being live streamed on Facebook. So for comments and questions, if you have, so feel free to post your thoughts and comments via the chat box throughout the webinar. So I will try my best to take note of these points and bring them up during the forum and during the question and answer proper. If you can write your questions or in the chat box, then we'll try to read them or acknowledge the person asking the question when we address the queries. So we would also want to have an evaluation of the event after the session. So we will be sending the participants' evaluation forms to help us address gaps and to improve future activities as well. So the house rules are flashed again. So if you can take a look at them. And also for the participants, we will be muting you so we can hear the participants better. Okay. So again, to everyone, whether you're watching us, you are participating in this Zoom session or you're watching us through Facebook live stream. So welcome again to this session on the other pandemic, online gender-based violence in Southeast Asia. So the title of the event is such because we're still in a pandemic. COVID-19 is still very much with us. But we do recognize that gender-based violence is likewise a pandemic. It is all around us. The harm that it inflicts on women, on girls, and other individuals is really wreaking havoc on populations in the different regions. And more so, online, the violence exacerbates what is already existing. So the harm is doubled as well. So before we proceed, we just like to come up with a general understanding of what online gender-based violence is all about. Although the video has already shown that, we know that whenever there are different or new, we know that whenever societies or undergo demographic, political, or economic changes, then different or new forms of violence against women also increase and they emerge. And so when the internet came about, when the ICTs were there, all these social media platforms, these platforms became sites of diverse forms of violence against women in the form of pornography, sexist games, breaches of privacy, etc. So to give a definition of what online gender-based violence is all about, the video also showed it. It is any act of gender-based violence against women that is committed, assisted, or aggravated, whether in part or fully, by the use of ICT, such as mobile phones and smartphones, the internet, social media platforms, or email, against a woman because she is a woman or it affects a woman disproportionately. So gender-based violence offline is similar to gender-based violence offline, that which happens online, uh, to that which happens online. Women are also disproportionately targeted for violence through the use of different forms of information and communications technology. So the violence that takes place online is it takes place in a continuum of violence offline, and often that which is it exacerbates it. And violence online is fueled by a pervasive culture of sexism and misogyny that is taken as a social norm. So what else differentiates offline gender-based violence from online gender-based violence? Well, we can mention about the anonymity. Of course, the perpetrator of the violence may be anonymous to the victim survivor. Well, of course, anonymity may be good and bad. So, but we'll discuss that later. The issue of technology, of course, with technology, there is automation. And if you want to share, let's say, an intimate video without consent, then it's so easy. You're not limited to where you are, to where your country alone. With just a click of a button, then you can spread already a video. And there are many ways of propagating it. And if you share something online, then it leaves a trace. You can't just delete it if you want to. So in Southeast Asia, as our countries come to recognize the harm of online bullying and violence, only certain categories, usually race and religion, are systematically recognized as being actual targets of harm. Now, the concept of online gender-based violence remains non-existent and elusive to many, including to law enforcers like the police. So for this online discussion, we will aim to unpack the gender component of online gender-based violence and its relationship with gender inequalities, as well as identify the challenges and strategies that come with the intersectionalities of women's identities on digital space, a space that is decentralized and comprises of globally dispersed actors. So to help us understand further what online gender-based violence is, as it manifests in the Southeast Asia region, I am pleased to introduce to you feminist friends from the region who have been working on the issue of gender-based violence for many years. So our panelists, our speakers, including myself, are part of existing networks working on these issues for several years now. So yeah, okay, let me introduce now our speakers. So I will do it alphabetically based on their countries of origin. So first we have from Indonesia, we have Dita Katurani from the Purple Code Collective. Please say hi, Dita.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, next we have Serene Lim from Chris Network based in Malaysia. Hi, Serene.
Hello, everyone. Hi.
Yes, and from Myanmar, we have Q Kiao. Yes,
Hi.
so nice to have you with us, Kiao. And from the Philippines, we have Tina Lopez from the Foundation for Media Alternatives. Hi, Tina.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
And from Thailand, we have Darika Bamrungchok from Engage Media.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, so good to have all these feminists in the region with us to discuss the issue. So the first question I think would be for everyone. So how would you describe um, gender-based violence, both offline and online, in your country? So during the pandemic, has there been any change? Did you notice if there has been an increase in the number of online gender-based violence? And what about the trend or the types of uh, gender-based violence happening during the pandemic? So anyone would like to start? Maybe I can start with you, Dita.
It's me. Oh, okay. Um, all right. Thank you, Lisa. I think we've heard about this, yeah, about the gender-based violence, both on the ground and also online from a lot of media. Media have reported from all over the world that the number is increasing. And in Indonesia itself, it's not a far cry difference. There's a lot of reports, more reports than we have before the pandemic, both the on the ground and also online. But we don't really know, me myself at least, we don't really know the numbers, but we know that it's increasing. Like for example, the Women Commissioned on online, sorry, the Commission on anti-gender based violence in Indonesia have reported that the cases reported to them has increased around 80% in the first 2 months of the pandemic. Yeah, that is also including the online gender-based violence. I want to, because our topic is online gender-based violence, I want to touch a little bit more on that. A lot of like online gender-based violence has been going on since a long time ago. We've known, and all of the speakers here, all of my friends, we've been talking about it, working on this issue since I don't know how many years ago. um, but it started to be like a common knowledge of many people's, right? But then people think that this is a new types of violence. Well, it's actually not. It's just that women now, because women have experienced it for many years since they use the internet, especially with the rise of social media. But before, people just don't know. The victims don't know or cannot articulate the experience that they have online, right? But now people can articulate, okay, what I experience is violence now. So that is actually help people to understand that online gender-based violence is actually violence. And it's a very good news that the Women Commission in Indonesia has started to recognize it as a types of violence, starting in 2019 with a report of 90 something cases for 2018. And in their 2020 report, the cases skyrocketed to 281 cases that they recorded in 2019. And also, of course, now during the pandemic, it's also increased by 80% in the first 2 months. It also, we from Purple Code Collective, we also assist victims, and we become one of the very few referral organizations or group of the Women Commission. We also recorded a rise on the number, because like usually we receive reports from women around, say, 2 or 3 cases a week. Now we got reports from victims or from the referral from Women Commission. It's around 3 to 4 a day. So yes, it's a sharp increase in the cases of gender-based violence, both offline and also online. That's what I can share from Indonesia in terms of the numbers and statistics. Back
Okay,
to you.
so yes, thanks so much, Dita, for sharing. So maybe I can call on Serene. What about the situation in Malaysia when it comes to online gender-based violence? Similar to Indonesia, is it also something that is already recognized in your country? Like Dita mentioned that the Women Commission in Indonesia recognizes it as a form of violence already. Is it the same in Malaysia, Serene?
Um, so in Malaysia, there is definitely more recognitions on the term cyberbullying, but often the gender elements is not so understood. People see this as a mere online bullying matters. But also very similar to Dita's, it's really hard to say in affirmative that there has been an increase of OGBV during the pandemic simply because we don't have a systematic way in documenting these cases. We don't have the capacities and resources because it is happening on a daily basis. And online gender-based violence takes different forms, happens in different platforms, different spaces. Sometimes it happens in WhatsApp group chat, and that's no way for us to sort of monitor that properly as well. And also in our attempts to monitor and document these cases, right? When we notice like a trending topics, and then a woman is being mobbed online, when we reach out to them, they would actually ask these questions. I'm not too sure if this is a case of online gender-based violence, but they were actually receiving rape threats, harassments through their direct messages, and they were dogpiled by people online. And yet, there's very little awareness among the women. That's one. And I think secondly, when we ask them why, when this happens, why did you not report to police or social medias, or just to reach out for help? And their response seems to be like, oh, this is normal, this is just part of us being on social medias. So the mob mentality is something that people have sort of normalized. So they think that, okay, this happens to me, like after 3 days, netizens would move on to another person. So it's also something for us to question, right? How our cultures have sort of normalized attacking and also receiving attacks from large numbers of people. But there is some trends that we are noticing, because during lockdowns in many different places, a lot of people has to retreat to their domestic life, and there's an increase of use of social media platforms. And we noticed that women are putting a lot more content on TikTok. And TikTok is a very different, kind of creature. It doesn't thrive on very polished content. It thrives on the really unpolished, like the everyday life. You don't have to shoot with like fancy cameras, just your normal phone cameras, and even the audio is like it's not perfect. People like that kind of videos. But because of that, we are also exposing more and more of our private life, and in a ways it is empowering, but then it also exposes women to a lot more attacks. So what we observe is that online gender-based violence manifested on TikTok as well. A lot of women are being shamed, are being attacked. A lot of, especially men, they are questioning all these young girls. Because the populations on TikToks are usually a lot more younger. They start questioning, it's like, why are our young generations, especially young women, are wasting their time? Instead of focusing on studies, why are they exposing their bodies and things like that? So a lot of moral policing, body shamings and such. And because of the way TikTok is designed, you can download the videos even you don't have an account. So people are actually downloading the videos of these women, and they disseminate this on Twitter, on private chat groups, YouTube, and that's where the shamings happens as well. And we are also noticing a lot more very subtle kind of discourse that is happening on Twitters because of lockdown. There's a lot of questions on gender roles at home. People are questioning, maybe this is a good thing that lockdowns is happening. women are finally staying home and they're cooking. Maybe this is a lesson for women. So a lot of polarized discussions on social media during that, and a lot of women are attacked as well for trying to defend that things. And it doesn't help when we have a ministry of women who sort of endorse that ideas that women should play particular roles at home. The Ministry of Women's actually issue like a guidance for women how to remain peace in the family. So they actually put up poster and say that you should learn to be manja when you're trying to ask your husband to share household chore. And for some reason they say you should speak like a Doraemon. To tell people that you should be manja manja. Manja means like you should be what's the word for manja in English? You should act cute, I guess, with your husband. So you have a Ministry of Women who's actually endorsed that ideas. And they also say that as women, you may also want to consider putting on makeup at home. So it is this kind of discourse that encourage the men to then behave like they are the king at home and also on social medias. And therefore the trollings of anyone who sort of trying to push back that narrative. Yeah. So that's all for my sharing for now.
So thanks, Serene. Yes, we also heard about the ministry actually encouraging women to wear makeup even at home. Yeah, it saddens us that with the pandemic, the trend is that it has been increasing. So I was wondering, Tina, in the Philippines, since the Foundation for Media Alternatives also monitors the cases that are being reported in media. So have you also seen an increase? And and do you think that, like, just like what Serene mentioned, is it also something that is being normalized these days?
Well, I think this COVID-19 pandemic, it's already exacerbated the main concerns of, having this kind of gender-based violence. And during the hard lockdown, no, or locally known as uh, here in the country is the enhanced community quarantine, there has been an increase of reported cases of online gender-based violence. And since the lockdown was declared on March 15, we were able to record 103 cases of online gender-based violence. So this is something terrible for us because the number has already increased now from January to June. There is a 30% increase, but as of today, we were able to map, I think, around 124 cases. So the number is continuously increasing, and predominantly the unauthorized use of photo or videos of someone, especially women, was the top related abuse. And this is followed by threats or blackmail, no, and involving abusive comments. So these are the most committed violations. And of course, the mobile phone and social networking platforms such as Facebook, Telegram, and messengers are most used platforms to commit online gender-based violence. And with regards to videos, we also found out that this is also common. We also found out that there is a common material, no, that are being circulated online. So remarkably, these cases are basically focused on online sexual exploitation of children, or also known as the OSEC. So there is also a rampant cases with regards to young women or young girls. And like this video conferencing platforms also, like Zoom and Google Meet, were also infiltrated by the perpetrators, no? Like if you heard about the Zoom bombing, it also happened through Google Meet, especially when the class started sometime in October. So there were reports coming in that some female students are already experience harassment from unknown people, and suddenly they are started drawing or showing vulgar images or doing something that are not really for someone who are not really comfortable to experience that. And lastly, I think just last month we were able get to get a Google Drive link, which many netizens found difficult to report after seeing a publicly accessible link, no, through Google Drive. And this Google Drive link contains women nudes photo and video. It also circulated without their consent. So I think this is one of the recent development with regards to online gender-based violence. And then the very new about this COVID-19, there were also reports, no, after women filled up the contact tracing form in public space, especially for those who are traveling or having the getting access to public transport, no, so such as bus terminal and restaurants. Hours or days, these women are started receiving unwanted messages or calls through their mobile phones, or sometimes even receiving some message requests through their social media accounts. And the perpetrators are usually are different kind of men, no, across all the ages and and then the status quo. So I think that's the current scenario of online gender-based violence in the Philippines.
So thank you, Tina, for sharing the situation in the Philippines. So maybe we can move on to Myanmar. Kiao, how is the situation when it comes to online gender-based violence in Myanmar? Is it the same as mentioned already by Serene, by Dita and Tina, that social media, almost all forms of social media platforms are being used to um, perpetrate violence against women.
Yeah, I mean, what, as Serene said, in terms of moral policing and women being ashamed for using social media platform, it is the same. The way that society put a lot of pressure and shaming women is also something which is unfortunately we are also seeing in Myanmar as well. But what I want to share here is also, as an ODF fellow, my research was looking into the surveillance and the censorship in Myanmar. And as part of the study, I decided to interview human rights defenders, activists, researchers, and the journalists. And what I'm seeing is that 79% of the survey, the participants do not feel secure online, even though there are a lot of high levels of intimidation and physical surveillance by the authorities. They don't feel, they feel they feel more vulnerable on the internet. And then because of those situations, 45% of the people started to, self-censor themselves, even though, they are the people working on, like peace process, human rights violation documentation, digital rights, and, legal framework. But what I am seeing is that out of those 45% of the people who started to self-censor themselves, 72% of the people are women. And it is also because in terms of violence, what we are seeing is that there are pressure being put on their families and their loved one as well. Especially if their family members work with authority or working for the government. So that's the kind of the pressure they are also getting from the authority. And because I know that you asked me to focus on social media, but if that's okay, I want to share a little bit about how this COVID-19 is also having impact on
Yes,
the activists and human rights defenders. Because when I was talking to the woman, human rights defenders, one third of the women activists who were interviewed said that they are being harassed relentlessly because they are women. So the rest of the women, started to self-censor themselves by keeping low profile from the ultra nationalist groups. So this experience is really common in Myanmar, where women are routinely harassed by pro-military groups and ultra nationalist groups like Mabada.
So Mabada is an organization notorious for spreading anti-Muslim sentiment across the country, and many of the women who counter hate speech on Facebook, monitor backed by the Mabada and the pro-military groups. So in turns, women have been harassed by having their Facebook pages flooded with comments, or their messenger messages. Like people started sending inappropriate pictures, graphics to them on Messenger. Sometimes, they call them on Messenger. So that's the kind of, like unfortunate trends that we are seeing. And also, of course, the activists were also talking about, taking a break from social media and basically the online space because of those harassment that they are facing online and offline. But, because of COVID-19, if we are not interacting on online space, then we won't get anywhere. So, people have not been able to do it, and it is adding another layer of stress to the people, to the human rights defenders. So that's what we're seeing. But if we look at social media, part of it is that so to give you a little bit of context here in Myanmar, the authority use human resources a lot, especially from the police department, where they have this special branch of the police department, and we call them SB in short. So they monitor people in physical space. So they surveil people in the physical space, but also on the online space as well. And they have the list of the outspoken human rights defenders, activists, journalists, which they monitor all the time. Because some of the activists say that after they post about doing a protest, and in 15 minutes they will get a call from high-level government officials threatening them not to do it. So that's a kind of surveillance situation that we are also seeing in terms of social media. But of course, for a lot of women human rights defenders and activists, they are getting a lot of online attacks when they are covering or speaking out on the sensitive issues. And for journalists, for women journalists specifically, attackers often post the journalists' personal information or spread misinformation and publicly shame them on Facebook. And threats are primarily communicated on Facebook messengers, and also people that I interviewed indicated that that type of intimidation is common for most women journalists and activists, and it has been cases for years. So yeah, that's what I want to share. Because of all those intimidation, harassment that they are getting from social media platforms, what we are seeing is sadly they started to keep in low profile on online spaces and started to self-censor themselves.
Yes, thank you, Kiao, for sharing what's happening in Myanmar. And maybe we can go back to that research that you did later on. So now let's move on to Thailand. We know that there are protests currently going on in Thailand. So how is this in any way related to issues or the increase of, has there been an increase of online gender-based violence because of these protests? Darika?
Okay, thank you, Lisa. I think in terms of the concept of the gender-based violence, like the situation in Thailand is quite similar to our speaker is already mentioned, especially in Myanmar. I think we are
Tarika, I think you're muted.
have to be. Is this clear? Is this working? Okay. So when it's come to the issue during the pandemic in Thailand so far seem to have been under control of the domestic COVID case, but we are facing another political situation because of the ongoing pro-democracy protest in Thailand during this time. So I would like to give a brief background of the current protests and how to be related to the online gender-based violence targeting the activists on the ground. So at the beginning of this year, at the same time when the COVID pandemic came to Thailand, the anti-government protest started by the student movement and now have to develop into almost like daily of the protests across the country up until today. And for the protest for this time is led by young generation, including the high school student as a core group of the organizer the protest. And from my observation at the protest, majority of the protesters are women. Actually, we don't have the actual number for this. And many the protest leaders and the frontliners are the young women activists as well. And if we look back at the political situation landscape in Thailand after the military coup in 2014, the cost of being an activist who speak up for pro-democratic value and human rights in the country is very high. But if you are the female activist, the cost of being the activist is higher than a male activist because we are facing many challenges related to the gender issue, both like online and offline. And during the protest, actually one of the activist group, they put their name on social media and then they say, if I translate in English, like, what's wrong with the Thai society when it's come to the gender issue? And we have found a number of the reporting harassment during the protesting and targeting the women and LGBTQ group is like increasing as well. There are many forms of the online gender-based violence that happening, especially sexual harassment, public shaming on social media, especially targeting the young female activists. And one of the cases is a feminist activist who have been spoken about the issue of gender equality. And after her political activism, she received many negative comments which relate to the sexual harassment and her personal information, photos being shared online. And some of them have been like making fun of her appearance, her hair, her body, the way she dressed up, and relate to a rape threat as well. After a storm of the social media attack, she went off the social media for a while. After this case, a network of the Thai civil society released a statement about the online sexual harassment against the activists, especially for the female activists and LGBT group as well. Apart from this case, actually many women and LGBT group activists who speak about the gender equality, sexual harassment in Thai society, but become a target of the online gender-based violence afterward. And also recently a student group who dressed in the high school uniform at the protest in Bangkok. And she put the tape over her mouth and then hold the paragraph saying that she has been sexuality abused by her teacher and school is not a safe space. But right after that, she received like 1,000 negative comments on social media targeting on her behavior. Actually, many cases like have done by the people who have the different political opinion, but many online gender-based violation in Thailand relate to the state sponsored information operation. We call in Thailand like IO that belong to the Loyal Thai Army. So sometimes we call like a cyber army. And that issue like sexual harassment both online and offline often like overlooked, and the Thai authority do not provide a solution or a mechanism for a victim to take the legal action. And of course, one of the consequence is often is lead to the self-censorship, and some of them decided to leave the social movement. And I think another one challenge in Thailand, I think is we lack of the documentation when it comes to the number of the gender-based violence. I think we don't have the clear number also. I think that is what happening in Thailand briefly. So I will stop it now and hand over to Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Darika, for sharing what's happening in Thailand. It's sad to know that, you know, when women speak up, they are being harassed online through many different forms. And I guess that thing is being shared in the different countries. So the next is so we have all these cases. We know that online gender-based violence is very rampant in all countries in the region. So how are cases actually being addressed maybe this is for all again. In how are cases being addressed and in your different countries? Are there specific laws in each of your countries that address specifically online gender-based violence? And if there are laws, are they actually working? Are they able to respond to the cases? And if there are no laws, then uh, how are the cases being addressed? Who addresses them? And I think the question of one of our participants, Ging Cristobal, is related to this also. So what is being done by government and NGOs to address issues related to online gender-based violence, including those that uh, happen, that are perpetrated against LGBTQI persons? Anybody who would want to take on that the question first?
I am happy to take on it.
Yes, Kiao.
So in Myanmar, I mean, I'm not an expert on the policy, but we do have, you know, laws protecting, quote unquote, protecting violence against women. But the thing is, the whole system also need to be changed in terms of, the if a woman take the case to the court, it can take really long, even if it's, a rape case, it can take 1 year to 2 years, and it's just really exhausting, tiring, in terms of mentally as well. But for in terms of the legal framework, there is this POVO law that is still, it is a bill which was drafted early this year, and it is still in the parliament. It's not been passed yet. But when I was looking at it, it's not just covering the offline, but also they are trying to cover the online space as well, which I feel is a positive thing. But in terms of the definition for woman, they said the thing is the way they said it in Burmese is problematic to me, because they said it lumima, which means human woman, or maybe they are trying to say the human body woman. So I am taking that as a problematic, because in terms of woman, they are not covering all the women, including the trans woman as well. But I feel like they are trying to define woman as biological woman, and that is assign a birth woman, and it's a problematic thing that I'm seeing. But in terms of LGBTIQ, there are organizations who are working tirelessly. For example, like Gala Rainbow and Equality Myanmar, working on these issues. But still, it is still a struggle, and there needs to be a lot more done for online and also offline. So that's the situation we have right now in Myanmar. And of course, I'm not an expert on this, so that's all what I've gathered so far.
So thanks, Kiao, for responding to that. So Dita, do you also have a law that is particular about online gender-based violence in Indonesia? And do you have cases of LGBTQI?
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, we don't have any law in Indonesia. Even we still don't have a laws on sexual violence against women and others. Actually, only in our penal code that mentioned that the form of violence is actually rape, which have a very narrow definitions. Rape is perceived as a penetration between penis and vagina, and that's all. And even it doesn't recognize marital rape. So we don't have that. We do have a law, no, I mean a proposed bill in 2016, but they remove it from the priority legislation this year, because of like a different opinion. They said that this is not according to the culture of Indonesia. So if we don't have that, elimination of sexual violence law in Indonesia, just imagine how could we have that online gender-based violence law. So it is the difficulties that we have now. If there's a victim's file a report to the police in regard to online gender-based violence that they experience, the police always suggest the victims to use our ICT or cyber crimes law, which is really don't have a gender element on it. And then also because in Indonesia as activists, we refuse that law. We don't want to use it. So we are in a very difficult situation as to what laws that we want to use when we file a report to the police in regard to online gender-based violence cases. Um, so that is the situation. Oh, also, we don't have like a personal data protection law. We do have the bill. It's been in the parliament for many years now, but it's still not being passed. So yeah, so that's the gap and the one of the biggest challenge of this situation, of this violence, because we cannot bring it to the police. If we do, which some of the victims file a report, it doesn't go anywhere because there's no law that can be used to deal or to handle these cases. For Ging's question, LGBTIQ, yes, we do have that. And that's also different types of online gender-based violence experienced by the LGBTIQ persons in Indonesia. One of the highest cases is actually online harassment, where if you are an opened LGBTIQ person online and then you express your political opinions, for example, or if you campaign for LGBTIQ rights, then you will get attacked. And the attack always based on not your opinions, not your political opinions, but based on your sexuality. So that is what is very rampant in Indonesia. But it also the NCII or non-consensual dissemination of intimate image also happened a lot to LGBTIQ persons in Indonesia. And there are a few cases reported, not a lot, but few cases is what we call honey trap. That there are a few cases of that as well, where they met people or someone through dating apps, and then they met offline, but then they got their pictures taken, and being blackmailed because of that. So those are the cases of LGBTIQ Indonesia. And what is very saddening is that when it happened to women now, women still have a lot of women now, a lot of women victims of OGBV, they have the courage to file a report to the police, but not with LGBTIQ persons because of the cultures here, the anti-LGBT sentiments. It's what hinder LGBTIQ persons from filing a report because they can get criminalized themselves. So that is also the challenge, and also the difference that become a challenge for us when we have to deal with cases of OGBV. So I think, yeah, that's for me, that, yeah, for now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dita. So, Tina, in the Philippines, we know that there are laws pertaining to violence against women. we also have the Cybercrime Prevention Act, and that is specific. Yeah, and also the Anti-Photo and Video Voyeurism Act. Do you think that these laws are working? Are women or are LGBTQI persons actually using these laws to report cases that they have experienced?
Um, Thank you for that question, no, Miss Lisa. Definitely, based on the media reports that we've mapped ever since, no, since the law has been passed, or even the media reported it, whether if it's on radio or newspaper or TV, those laws that you've mentioned have already used by many victim survivors of online gender-based violence. But there is another specific law that has recently passed now, which is called the Safe Spaces Act. So there is a specific provision there that talks about um, gender gender-based violence online and sexual harassment. So I think this is a new law, but it's very usual for some Filipinos to use this law, no, if they wanted to file charges. But again, seeking a legal redress, seeking legal services from the government, it's quite hard because you have to obtain specific evidence, no, to prove that this person commit this kind of crime against you. So it's a very long process. So of course anyone can file a case, especially the victim survivors. But again, you have to prove those evidences uh, until there is a specific grounds for the law enforcement to file a formal charges. So and then after, I think after getting all the evidences, the law enforcement, I guess, will ask will ask the court to, I don't know the process. How do you call that? The process. I think they will ask something, a certain document, no, for for them to start the investigation. So I think that's very how do you call this? It's quite hard for the victim survivors to get an access for that particular legal system we have.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tina, that the process can be tedious, no? That's why not a lot of women are reporting. Serene, you mentioned that in Malaysia, uh, not a lot of women are also reporting cases of online gender-based violence. Am I correct? And but if that is the case, then how can we encourage uh, more women and girls and LGBTQI persons who are experiencing online gender-based violence? How can we encourage them to report?
Um, so in our we are currently conducting a research where we interview 23 women. And of the 23 women, actually 2 of them made the lodge a police report. For the rest, it didn't even cross their mind to report. One of them, she was attacked on the basis of her identity as a lesbian, and to her, it's pointless to go to the police because she risks being investigated in return. Um, so I think in Malaysia, it's very similar to what the other speakers have shared as well. But I think when we look at law as a redress for women, right, maybe we have to question what's the purpose of law. One is really just it's to deter a certain behaviors from societies, is to punish people who had caused pains and harm to the other people. And second, it's also to set a sort of like a nominal behaviors among societies, like for example, telling people what is acceptable and what is not. Beating people, killing, stealing, it's not acceptable. So it's really to sort of regulate our behaviors, and sometimes it's needed. But some laws are also designed to sort of ensure the power of status quo, especially laws that criminalize LGBT person. And when it comes to law, we also have to understand that it is not the most diverse entity. It doesn't evolve as quick as it should be with technology. And the people who are managing or who are sort of running the legal systems are people who are of certain age, gender, and social class. So diversity is definitely lacking in the judiciary system, and that affects how we are able to exercise our rights when it comes to, even when we go to police, because the absence of that law means that the absence of a law that protects our rights as our bodily autonomy would deter us from being able to go to police and to seek for protections. But with that being said, we still need laws when it comes to online gender-based violence. And in most Commonwealth country where we use the common law systems, the penal code is actually very much applicable for most online gender-based violence cases. In Malaysia, penal codes has been used for non-consensual distributions of women's intimate images. But it's coming from a very patriarch and protectionist positions, because it says that you are distributing a content which is essentially my nude photo that is that would tarnish my reputations as a woman. So it comes from a positions where the law is trying to protect the purities of a woman. So in a way, it is also problematic, but it has been working for victims in some cases. And I think the other issues is also, it's not so much because of the absence of law, but also the invisibilities of women's experience by law enforcers, and also the cost of online gender-based violence. Because people tend to assume that this happens online, therefore you can just lock off and then nothing will happen. That's a very common response from police when women go to police stations. They would say that, so what, there's no real threat. So why are you wasting our time, wasting resources? But I think this is where we need to also, maybe as activists, to start thinking, how do we then formulate the cost, or rather the harms of online gender-based violence? It's exactly the fact that your aggressors are online, hence the harms is stronger, because you do not know your aggressors, which means they can be anywhere and anyone. The moment you step out of the street, your neighbors could be the aggressors who is attacking, who is sending like a bullet photos to you. Therefore, the harms is actually a lot more severe as compared to some cases where you know where your perpetrator is and you can actually take measurements to distance yourself from that person. But when it comes to online mob attacks, especially, you do not know. Therefore, there's no way you can take precautions to ensure your safety other than just locking yourself or isolating yourself from any social events. So that is actually a severe cost to women's public and political participation. And that's something that needs to be formulated as well, so that the law enforcers actually recognizes the harm for women. And I think the second things we also need to consider is that not all aggressions online, not all of them falls under the criminal behaviors. So that is actually the more problematic part, because sometimes if it can be just a young boy who is posting this tweet, you are fat, you are ugly, nobody will want to rape you. Technically, it's not a criminal behavior. But again, if you have 10,000 people saying something like that to you, it has a very severe harm and an impact on your mental health, and therefore your abilities to perform your daily life as well. So we need something to be able to address this sort of behaviors, and also to recognize that this is where I think having positive laws, what Tina just said about Safe Spaces Act, laws that move beyond just criminalizing and penalizing people behaviors, but laws that ensure that the rights and safeties of people are protected. So laws that actually compel, instead of punishing an individual, but actually compel an institution. For example, it's like the train stations, like social media platforms, or if you are running a network or schools, universities, because a lot of schools are also using online tools for classes as well, to sort of shift the burdens to them to ensure that they have some sort of policies to ensure a safe spaces for everyone. So for example, it's like a zero tolerance for sexism, whether it's online or offline. That would also really help to, in a way, shape people's behavior. Yeah.
Yes, definitely we need safe spaces, both online and offline, and we should not tolerate any form of violence. Yeah, I just remembered what Serene mentioned, and it is also related to what Darika mentioned earlier, that some women, when they get attacked online, when they experience violence online, they tend to isolate themselves. In the case of protesters in Thailand, they even some of them leave the movement. So whenever women, especially those in protests, experience this online gender-based violence, are they able to report it, Darika, to the authorities, or perhaps to the academic institutions, the schools where these young girls are, studying?
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Lisa. I think in Thailand, yes, it's quite similar to other Southeast Asia that we don't have the specific law to address the online gender-based violence. And sometimes if the incident happen, they use the Information Act and the Computer Crime Act to against the harassers. But it has done very little when it's come to the online gender-based violence, especially targeting the LGBTQ people. And also increasing the numbers of the online sexual harassment, especially against the women human rights defenders and the LGBT activists. But it seemed not to be taken seriously by the Thai authority. And what I have known from some of the women activists who have used to be report on her online harassment case to the police is quite difficult. I think it's similar what the Dina mentioned in the Philippines. I mean, the process is very, very difficult when it comes to the legal action. They have to find many evidence to prove that her case that real. They have to prove that what is the IP address of the harassers. And then it's so difficult if the activists have to ask the ISP in Thailand to help them to find out the ISP or technical problem of the harasser for that case. And I think many authority perceive that I think they're similar to other countries as well. When it comes to the online violation, it's not a big deal. It's not real, but actually they need to understand that it's real and it's a real violation with a real impact as well. And many women who has that experience, they had like emotional trauma, and some case that is moved from offline to online to offline consequence like a hate speech against the women and LGBTQ people as well. But I could say the last thing that, I mean, when it comes to Thailand, we are not living in the democratic society. That's why we could not trust, like, I mean, the rule of law. And many cases that the Thai government used the legal harassment, targeting the activists or the people who criticize them. And of course, they lack of the gender lens when it comes to the legal action. I think that's one is still difficult, especially for the critical time during the ongoing protests in Thailand. I think that's it for now. Yeah, back to you, Lisa.
Thanks, Darika. Uh, for the participants, if you have questions, you can post them in the chat box. I see there's one more here, but yeah, Darika, I agree that it's difficult when it's not just in Thailand, of course, even in other countries. Sometimes it's government, state agents that are doing the harassment against women, and when you want to prove something that an online harassment, online violence, it becomes difficult also, and the burden is usually on the woman. No? She has to find the evidence. She has to relieve the trauma all over again. she has to bear the burden for proving. She has to protect herself, and it's difficult sometimes to really access justice. And I think with that, we can move on to the use of platforms, because I think uh, uh, all the platforms, social media platforms, have been mentioned earlier as the sites where the violence is happening. So how can we exact accountability from the platforms? Because it is in these platforms that the cases are happening. Most of the cases are happening. Or should we exact accountability from them, or not? Anyone? Maybe, I don't know, Tina or Xiao or Dita.
I think I can start, and then like Serene and Dina and Dita and Tarika, they can
Yes, yeah.
also join in. I feel like whenever we talk about these stuff, there are a lot of overlap issues, commonality that we are seeing, in terms of the pressure from the society, or the harassment mainly coming from the authority, or like not like the pinnacle not really protecting the citizens, women, um, and of course when we shift to online platforms, the trends and the kind of abuse that we are seeing is also, I'm sure, like is pretty similar in our countries. And what I would want to see from the platforms would be to take this seriously, to be honest, to take this seriously, because I'm sure it is not just like one person talking to Facebook, one person talking to YouTube about these problematic content, or like attacks that we are seeing, we are experiencing. I'm sure it's not just like one person. I'm pretty sure they've had a lot of complaints and conversation around this issue, but I would really want to know what they are doing regarding that. I know that, for example, Facebook is stepping up to work on, disinformation and hate speech, but really, gender-based violence online, gender-based violence in general, also needs to be, taken as a serious matter, taken as a priority, and need to engage with the organization who are working on these issues in countries, in the region, and really like really working hard, investing people and time to improve their project, so that the perpetrators are not using their platforms to carry out these abuses.
Yes, agree with you, Kiao. Tina, would you like to take on that question as well? The
Well,
role of platforms.
the role of platforms, definitely they have a big role, when it comes to addressing the issue of online gender-based violence. But in the case of Philippines, I think we are quite lucky, because of the Facebook Philippine group. So we were able to get in touch with them and ask to have a dialogue with women's groups, and how we can work together to fight this kind of gender-based violence. And basically, they are really enthusiastic to work with women's group, and I think having a good, not necessarily a partnership, but a kind of critical engagement with this intermediary is quite beneficial for us, because we were able to ask them, other than your community guidelines, what you can do beyond this. So how can you help this victim survivors to have a safe space, by maximizing their platforms as well. So yeah, I think that's one of the main role of the intermediaries like Facebook and other platforms. So having a good conversation with them and ask them how they can go beyond yeah, to their own policy.
Okay, so engagement with platforms.
Mm-mm.
Dita, do you think that reporting mechanisms of these platforms, the community standards that they have, are they enough in helping address cases of online gender-based violence? Or
Um,
if not, what can be done?
okay. Um, well, no, not at all, of course. And then I think the first thing that we need to also, the first thing that I want to say is that when we talk about online gender-based violence, it is very important to talk about the accountability of platforms, no? And then it is often missing from the equation. Because when we talk about the online gender-based violence, I think Serene touched upon this a little bit earlier, is that we focus on the perpetrators only, yeah. But we know that, but we actually already know, if we see the definitions of online gender-based violence in the video earlier, also it's shown that it is actually facilitated by this tech platform, right? And therefore it is very important to talk about the accountability. No, and before, and then the accountability, it doesn't only start in the reporting mechanism that they have. Their accountability, it starts from earlier, from the development, from the design, from the development of the technology itself. If we see, a lot of people think that technology is neutral, algorithm is neutral. No, it's never neutral. It is built by people, and the people have their biases. If we see, the diversity report this year from like a giant tech companies like Facebook, Google, and also Apple, their female technical staff is only around 24%. It is only a very small increase from the report in 2017, which is like around 17%. Yeah. So the development, the design, the development of this, all of this platform never put the protection or the safety and security of people in general, and especially of women, and also LGBT IQ communities, and also other marginalized communities or oppressed identities. No, they never think of that. If we see, even in the flaws ecosystem or free libre open source software, it is still very dominated by the global north white male. So when they build the technology, the tools, the platforms, they never think of us. They never think about our interests, our safety, our security. So I think that is why very important for us to demand the accountability of this tech platform. So and also responding, like the very minimum that we have now is that reporting mechanism. It is still not enough. They don't have none of those platform, social media platform, actually have a specific reporting mechanism for OGBV. So OGBV cases is treated as the same as any other, like a bullying or online harassment. Therefore, there's no priority in handling those cases. Yeah. So if you report like the dissemination or the sharing of your private or your intimate images on social media, so your report will get in line with, so like hundreds of thousands or millions of other cases all over the world, right? So there's then, and then you just sit and wait. It will take days even for that images, for your intimate images to be taken down. And then imagine with the nature of technology, where it is very easy to be multiplicated, amplified. So it's going to be, like from one perpetrator, it will, uh, multiplied into a different or many other perpetrators. So from one account, it could spread to so many other accounts. So the more you wait, because there's no priority in handling those cases, the more you wait, the more you become a victims, right? So that's the reality. And there's a lot of cases that we found is that um, when we file a report, and then we got a reply from them saying that this person doesn't violate their community guidelines. That is, we have cases like that. On Facebook, actually, Facebook is the least responsive here in Indonesia. Um, Maybe different from the Philippines. If we report, so there's this growing trend of women's photo, not necessarily with sexual nuance. It's just a photo posted on a groups, Facebook groups that has this, like a prostitution groups, and then they put your photo there and then put your phone number and your name and then say that you offer sexual services. Yeah, so we reported cases like that. They take down only your photo or the reported photos, but not the whole groups. Although it's clearly that the group, that Facebook groups are actually disseminating um, women's photos and uh, other personal information in there. So that's the kind of thing that we need to also look to see the accountability of the platform. But it also, I want to point out something in response to Tina. It is, I think it is good to have a critical engagement with them, but we need to have a more unified action, not just on, like based on countries, which is good. I mean, in Indonesia, I do have someone that I go through on Twitter every time there is a cases like that. But I think that is not enough, that, and then I have to acknowledge that that's my privilege because I work on this issue. I know people inside all of those platforms, but uh, there's so many people who don't have that kind of contacts. You know what I mean? I can have, a meeting with people on Twitter to talk about this, but what about the other people? So I think we need to have this unified um, action to ask for, to demand for their accountability, not only from the aspect of reporting mechanism, but the whole thing. If we agree that online gender-based violence is the root causes of it is, this misogynistic and patriarchal culture, then we have to go deep on also in combating it. We need to also go deep on that from the get-go. And also, I don't know, I hope, because this is important, we often focus on this violence against, with the online gender-based violence that happen on social media. Tina said there's also on WhatsApp and also Telegram and etc. But there's this one type of online gender-based violence that has gone unnoticed, which is the tech enabled surveillance against women. Yeah, a lot of men, it could be the father in the family or the husband or the boyfriend, like they are surveilling women's movement through a lot of different apps. One of the apps is the safety apps, so using the excuse of protecting women, but they're actually monitoring every move of the women in the family or in the relationship. Yeah, not only women, but this is also happening to LGBTIQ, because there's also a lot of LGBTIQ couples, at least in Indonesia, still adopt that heteronormative relationship, right? So all of those things, using the safety apps, and also the even as simple as that, those perpetrators can access our account that we use for our smartphone, like Find My iPhone or Find My Phone. They can actually like always monitor the movement of the women in the relationship. So those are that is one type of OGPV that often go unnoticed because of this excuse of protecting the women. And mind you, a lot of those uh, safety apps now even have a feature of geofencing, meaning that if you tell your partner, your husband, your boyfriend, that you go to this place, your partner, your husband, your boyfriend can geofence you only to that place. So when you go out of that place, this app will notify your partner that you leave the fence, and that often create a lot of other violence later on. So yeah, that's from me, Lisa.
Yes, thanks, Dita, for mentioning about the the other forms of violence not happening on social media. So we know that this exists, tech-enabled surveillance applications, tools, and this like spywares that are commercially available already are being used by men, actually um, to s- to to surveil their partners, the women in their families. And it's also a way for them to control women. Um, yeah, and this has been, I think, documented in some cases already. There were studies done about this. I think in Korea, for instance, there were reports before that some men are putting, these small devices, cameras, in toilets, and they're looking at images of women while they're doing their thing in the bathroom. No? So that's sad. So yeah, so we have a question here earlier that was posted by Rizky Febriani. Is there any huge gender gap in terms of using technology and the internet? And is online gender-based violence making that gap wider? So I'm not so sure about this question, but is there anybody who's willing to take on this question?
Yeah. So in against also like the studies that we have done, women after, especially after mob attacks, immediately usually their responses, it depends on your capacity as well, right? Where's your social positions, whether you are able to defend yourself online. Um, but a lot of them would actually deactivate social media for some time. Um, some just deactivates or lock off. Some would delete the account, but they always come back. Um, they could delete the accounts for 2 3 months, but after that they would always come back with the more private accounts or different names, and then sometimes a perpetrator would find a way to also dox them, or to rather like to disseminate their information so their new account. um, but the thing is, women's never leave social medias after the attack. And in one of the workshop we have done, when we shared this with participants, and we sort of want to know, like, what's the motivations, like why do women keep coming back to social medias even after all these attacks. And this one participant, she actually said that asking women to not to delete their social media accounts after online gender-based violence is like asking them to not go out to the street after they have been sexually harassed. So social media is actually a public spaces, and there's no way for us to not be there. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So yeah, I don't think it actually contributes to any gaps in terms of internet usage. But I do, in our interviews, all women's actually practice self-censorship after an incident of online gender-based violence. So they're a lot more careful in what they say. They filter what they say because they don't want to be attacked. So that's yeah. So that's my response to that.
So thanks, Serene. Um, you mentioned about censorship, so I would like to go back to Kiao. Kiao, you mentioned that in your research, in the study that you did, um, activists, especially women activists, including journalists, um, practice self-censorship because of harassment. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Sure. As I mentioned, a lot of women so just to go back a bit, in Myanmar, government spent, $4 million to form a social media monitoring team.
Yes, Kiao, are you still there?
Was the internet okay? I feel like I was hearing my voice.
No, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. So because of the so the government formed the social media monitoring team in 2017. So that happened under the NLD government. So a lot of people started being very conscious about, what they are talking on online, because they always think that, government is monitoring them. But then since then, people have been started to censor a bit. But for the people like, activists, journalists, and human rights defenders who are very outspoken and working on sensitive issues are also being harassed on online spaces. So they started to, keeping low profile, meaning to say they won't talk a lot on their posting on Facebook, because they know that, the police are monitoring their accounts. So with some of the journalists that I talked to, especially the women journalists, were telling me that, the special branch police will tell them that, this is my account, can you please accept? Or like, sometimes they will be like, oh, I am monitoring your account, but with a fake account. So it is sort of like a complicated relationship, where the police who is, monitoring and surveilling you is also trying to have a friendly relationship with you by telling you that, to accept their accounts on Facebook. Well, of course, that they will be, looking at your account, what you're saying, what you're posting. So a lot of people started to post less on their Facebook, and also, of course, on Twitter as well, for the people who have, public profile on Twitter. So that is also the reason why people started to self-censor themselves. Especially, when, as I mentioned, out of 46% of the people who are self-censoring, 72% of the people are women, working on peace process, human rights violation documentation, digital rights, and legal reform. Um, that's the kind of situation that we are seeing. But also the other part, relating to self-censorship, is also, for when you are an activist, you get harassment, you get threatened, you get sent to jail. But also, of course, when you're a woman, you additionally, you get harassed, you get, inappropriate graphics, pictures and everything in your messenger. But also for women journalists, human rights defenders with who are, Chinese or Indian descendants, they also got a lot more harassment and discrimination. So, as you know, Gambia filed a case against, Myanmar for the Rohingya genocide. And since then, Muslims, a lot of Muslims activists, researchers are saying that they started to self-censor themselves on, on online space, because they worry that they will get more harassed because of who they are, linking to the ICJ case. And also because of COVID as well, when COVID started happening in US, people are saying like, like this is like the Chinese virus, linking it with the, like a racism. So a lot of some of the Chinese descended activists are also, self-censoring. So I think it's a mixture of, like the government surveilling, and also the social problems that we have here, the sexism and racism. And which is why a lot of people started to, especially women, started to self-censor themselves, because when they get attacked, it just doesn't end there. For some of the people, it also, have impact on their family, impact on their loved ones. And they said that, if it is like on me, I can take it. But if it is when it is going to my family and my loved ones, it just add a lot of additional stress and risk. So they started not to speak out a lot in online spaces.
Yeah, thanks, Kiao. So the other speakers, if you want to come in, if you want to respond also, or if there's some like an aha moment for you, you can also just join in the discussion.
I just want to add the part on the accountabilities of social media, because a lot of them are actually profiting from online gender-based violence, because in most cases, right, uh the I call it triggering content. So sometimes it could be just a selfie or like a controversial statements that a woman's put up. We You will see that this tweets would go viral, and that's money for Twitter, right? And because the more virals, the more engagements, the more retweet, the more the reshares, that's how they can get data. That's how they can get information on your political inclinations, on your preferred, choice of words, what kind of people you interact with. So these are all money for them. And it's very funny because this is where you also see a lot of people riding on a wider content, because in this age of attention economies, right, likes, followers, it's everything. And sometimes we see the curious bystanders, or people who are just in it to get the traffic. They would just say something that is not even contributing to the discussions, but something just funny, so that they drive traffic to their page. And then there's this business which are really fucking annoying. They would just, hey, they would write on the either the hashtag or just replied on the triggering content. They say, hey, check out my product, it's on promotions. It may seems like nothing, but all this little engagement, it actually increase the visibilities of your triggering content, and with that it also increases the opportunities of you making money. So sometimes I think maybe the solutions is not to improve their reporting mechanisms or content moderations. It's really a reconfigurations of the algorithms. Then they need to be transparent with people, maybe to push for an audits of the algorithms as well, right? To determine how do they decide what contents are worthy, how do they push certain contents to people, how do they actually develop this fucking echo chambers, because it's actually networking's all the aggressors, and that's how they gang up and plan mob attacks against Take Back Your Tag. And in Malaysia, it's against Women's March, and not just Malaysia, I believe it's everywhere in the countries. All these aggressors are fucking ganging up together to plan for an attack against Women's March. So we need to push for an audit on the algorithm. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. And if I can also say something.
Yes, please.
In terms of the platform accountability, I feel happy to know that, for example, like the Philippine team is, engaging with, like Tina and other people, and really keen on working on these issues. And that is also, I think it is good for the country, but also it is problematic because they will do that in Philippines, but they won't do that in, Myanmar or Malaysia. I think, Sari can also add on to that, is that the fact that, as someone have the email address or like a WhatsApp number of them shouldn't be a privileged thing. And the thing is, like, they should be, I just wanted to talk about the engagement, and it is not just the type of engagement where they will come to our session at the conferences or online space that we are doing, but rather sitting down with us, digging deep into the issues with us. Okay, what are we seeing? It is not just about taking down the content or getting the account back from someone whose account was hacked and being harassed from the account, but rather seeing the bigger picture and trying to dive into the problem and fixing it. And I definitely agree on that AI as well, is that, what is the data set that they are feeding to the AI? What are the classifiers that they are bidding? Is it possible for an independent body to look at it, to do an independent audit? Will they be open to it? So that's the kind of conversation that we should be having with them. We should be pushing with them, and they shouldn't. It shouldn't just be because in the past, before COVID, we will meet at the conferences. They will come to our session. We will be talking about these stuff. But then, they gave us the address card, and then it won't get us nowhere. We can connect the people who are already in touch. But then, when you ask people, hey, did they get back to you? They won't get back to us. So I would really want to see, not just like, of course, the internal people willingness and enthusiasm is very important, but also we need to take it to another level of engagement where we really, sit down, invest in human resources, time, and then definitely looking at the project and how it can be improve the project, not just about translating the community standards, or not just about translating the platform, because the bigger problem is how the project itself is the problem and discriminating. So that's just what I wanted to adding.
Yes, thank you, Kiao. So I agree that it's good if some countries can engage with platforms that are located in their own countries, but it's a privilege for some countries. But at the same time, even if you talk to, let's say, policy people in Facebook, for instance, in your country, then uh, they are not the ones who are deciding. Actually, they can say yes to you to a certain extent, they can help you, but when it comes to the bigger policies, it's actually uh, the guys in San Francisco who will decide the real policies of these platforms, no? So yes, it's good that we started talking about it. Yeah, I agree with Serene when you said maybe there's a need to reconfigure already the platforms, because they are really actually operating on this business model that would attract engagement, that would attract um, advertisements, no, because of the number of engagements there. And I agree that they're really benefiting from the hate speech, from all that violence that women especially experience in the different forms of platform. Dita, would you like to say something?
Yeah, actually, I want to touch upon the question that Rizky Febriani posted here. Is there any huge gender gap in terms of using technology and internet? And is this online gender-based violence make the gap wider? The second question is actually, I agree with what Serene said, and I'm not gonna respond to that, add to that. But yes, there is actually a huge gender gap in terms of using technology. I'm just gonna give you a, but I'm not sure about in each country. But in Indonesia, there's no survey or research on that. But we can actually hold on to what the report that Internet Telecommunication Union (ITU) put out in 2016. It says that there are 250 million less women on the internet. Yeah, so that's around 12% in a developed country, and around 32.9% in the developing countries. And aside from that, there is 1.7 billion women in low-income countries that don't even have a cell phone. Yeah, so of course this gender digital divide has a lot of aspect to that, right? From the gender itself, from class, from race, from economic, and also culture, right? And then also the way that they, even if you have money, but the way that the technology is built, it doesn't really put into account the user friendliness. And then with the fact that women get less education, especially on the area of technology, a lot of women cannot even navigate um, how to use technology, and how to use social media safely and securely, for example. And then also in relation to that I want to mention, which is very important, is that even when women are not connected to the internet, or even don't have a cell phone or any devices that are connected to the internet, they are still very vulnerable to become a victims of online gender-based violence. Yeah, there are cases of that like women, they are not on social media. Maybe they have cell phone, but they are not on social media, but they become the victims. their photos of, like, intimate photos or videos are distributed online, and with no connection, it is very hard for them to know that her or their photos are online, their intimate images are online, and then they don't have the opportunity to defend themselves. So it is very important, because this question is like, okay, because there's this high cases of OGBV, maybe it's a better idea for women not to be present on social media, or less presence on social media or on the internet. But that's not the case, because the more we are not connected, the harder position of women when it comes to online gender-based violence. We become more vulnerable to the OGBV, because we don't know what's going on there, and then we don't have the opportunity or the chance to defend ourselves when it happened. Um, so that's what I actually want to say.
Yeah, agree with you, Dita. You don't really have to be online on any platform to experience online gender-based violence. Uh, it's already 4:52 in my time, Philippine time and Malaysia time. So maybe we'll, if there are still questions from our friends who are with us in this platform, in the Zoom platform. Otherwise, maybe we'll have just one or two questions and we can already wrap up. The thing is that we know that sometimes government is not there to respond to the cases. Even the platforms, these tech companies can't respond to these cases. But how can, in that case, how can women, girls, LGBTQI persons protect themselves? Um, uh, are there already good practices, positive feminist responses to dealing with cases of online gender-based violence? Tina, would you want to start?
Okay. Yeah, the question is quite easy, but it's difficult to, to do, to put into action. But yeah, well, basically, if you go through online, maybe you can, other than tweaking the privacy settings and doing other digital stuff, maybe it's also good to keep the conversation going, no, about the rising cases of online gender-based violence. And if we can organize ourselves using that existing platforms, no, as a tool to amplify our voices and to influence other people to commit how to respond on this rising cases, um, it would be good. And then also maybe we can build a certain movement to, not necessarily specifically in the country, but also in other regions. That's also a good opportunity. um, FMA has been doing a lot of a focus group of discussion, and that's an online discussion around gender and ICT. And I think it's a good start right now to begin this kind of discussion with a feminist perspective, because uh, there are a lot of women, young women now are resisting. They are now resisting because of this rampant incident. So yeah, a good conversation is it's very meaningful for us.
Yes, Serene, I see that you wanted to respond already.
Yeah, Chris, I think it's really not easy for individual to sort of respond to online gender-based violence, because it's a lot to take on a personal capacity, especially when the state and the platform should be, they are in a much better positions to actually protect and defend our rights, but that's not being done. So it's a really heavy burden that is on us. It takes up resources. In Malaysia, so I've seen like how women push back against a Telegram groups of 38,000 men who shared women's not even nude photos, but just photos they posted on social media. For example, they could be wearing like a body hugging attire, and that's like a thing for them to, to be shared in the Telegram group. So a group of women actually come together, and they push back. They did a lot of awareness raisings, and they reach out to victims, support them. But it's a heavy cost on them, because for the entire 1 week, a lot of them they had shared that they have to abandon their daily obligations, whether it's work or schools. They have to take times off to just focus on this thing. So the burden is actually really, really heavy. But nonetheless, it's sort of like the only things we can do in the system that have sort of failed us. So I think when it comes, it's very important, and I do believe in the powers of networking women. I think it's important for us to work together and to sort of, like do something that convenes women and have a space where we talk about our responses. Because even the simple notions of whether to engage or not engage, that is something that everybody would have different take on it. So it's important for us to, I think, to have that space to share our responses, our thoughts, maybe just to knowing that sometimes blocking is not a weakness, it's just a form of self-preservation. So to really have space for us to discuss, because it's not just to discuss and process, but it's also a support system. So I think sometimes when it comes to online gender-based violence, the support system is not visible. And a lot of times women will actually reach out. And that was also something that was shared by the other women that we have discussed too. Instead of, like fighting for you on Twitters publicly, women would actually prefer to reach out like in private and check in, like, see, how are you? Are you okay? Do you want me to come over? So this is actually being done without visibly being seen online. So I think like having a strong support system is important. And I think as organizations, because we are in a better capacities and we have the resources to also facilitate that convening and that support system. So I see that as a way to move forward while we advocate for change in laws and policy, and also to demand for accountabilities from platforms.
So thanks, Serene. So Darika, what do you think? How can women, girls, LGBTQ persons protect themselves from violence,
Yeah.
considering that state, and then the platform sometimes are, we can't rely on
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, I totally agree what Serene already mentioned. I mean, that is a heavy burden on the women's side or LGBT people that have to handle this one. So, okay, for my case, as I provide a digital safety training for the activists, especially for the front line. So what we can do, how we can protect our identity online. But one is come to the online gender-based violence, that case by case. We have to deal like it depends on case by case. We have to do the risk assessment for each case, because it's not every people can handle the risk at the same time. Some people need to like deactivate their Facebook, but some people think that being public is more protect themselves. So it depends on they can do their risk assessment. This is the one thing. This is a case by case. But for the bigger picture, that we still need to move our conversation forward. Especially, I think I don't want to say that good timing in Thailand because of the protesting, but because of the protesting that many sexual harassment, gender issues, it comes up and people just speak up, because what we have seen before the protest, which means that we didn't have enough space to the people who have like the public debates. That's why many issues that comes up when they have the protest. I think this is the one thing that how we can move forward during the critical time in Thailand as well. I think that is something in Thailand. But again, at the big gap in Thailand when it comes to the mental health support for this case is still a big gap for the CSO, how we can deal with the mental health issue related to the online gender-based violence. Yeah, I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Darika. Maybe Dita or Kiao?
Kiao, you want to go first?
Now, Dita, go first. Then I'll piggyback.
Just to add to what Tareen and Darika said, I agree that, um, of course, when we talk about ending OGBV, it's like talking about ending GBV in general, no? Because this the root cause is, the misogynistic and patriarchal culture. We need to break that. We need to end that culture. But it's gonna take, I don't know how many centuries, maybe another centuries, because we've been fighting women. Women have been fighting against it for centuries already. So we might need another centuries. I don't know. But there are immediate response that we, of course, need to do. In Purple Coat, we came up with like a four different solution: social, technology, uh, psychology, and also legal, right? But the from our experience, ones that work more effectively and more feasible to do is the social. Technology is also feasible, but it's always short-lived. Yeah, we can just take down, and then they will appear again, for example, and the attack will happen again. So the support system is very much needed, and it could be different things, right? It could be like feminist army. When we stop being a bystander, if there is women being attacked online, then we have to come to defend. That's one. And then the second one is also that, like Serene said earlier, that we need to reach out to them and then tell them that you're not alone. What can we do? What can we help you with? And then if we have, probably because not everyone has experience in assisting victims of online gender-based violence, we can find, you can try to find people or organization who focus on has been working on these issues to find help together. That is very important. And we found that, like empowering women who became victims of attacks or violence online is very important. It's very important when their experience is being acknowledged, being recognized, being validified. They become more empowered to face the attack or the violence. They own it. My presence, I have the rights to be present on social media. For example, I have the rights to express my opinion, my body, my sexuality. They become empowered to deal with all of this violence that they experience. But there's also one thing that I wanted to talk about. It's also related to what Kiao said about this self-censorship or self gatekeeping. It happened a lot, but it's also not only because we think that's not, for me, that kind of solution doesn't come originally from the women itself, but from the society, because society often advise women not to do this and not to do that online, right? And then they got internalized within ourselves as women. So okay, so this is my mistake because I posted my sexy photos or videos online, or I do, like a video call sex that I'm not supposed to do. So or if you are, if it's in terms of your political opinions, being critical to the society, to the government, to the political system in your country, then okay, as a woman, we should not be too critical about those kind of things, because this is the consequences. So I think that is also what we need to overcome. We need to convince women that we all have rights to do that, and that the violence is not the consequences. It's not supposed to be the consequences. We need to fight against that instead of censoring the opinions or the expressions. And also one of the things that uh, to add to Darika in terms of the digital security, it is very important also that when for us when we are advocating these issues of online gender-based violence is also to mainstream the digital security capacity or knowledge of women. We need to first recognize, acknowledge that the way people have a relationship in the digital age have changed, right? So now you meet people online through dating apps or through um, what you call that social media, and you even have a sexual relationship online as well. We cannot say to women don't do that, but we need to really come up with a better digital security advices on how to do it safely. There are a few materials reference that we can learn online now. I'm not going to talk about it now because it's a long list of tips and tricks, but you can find it. So I think that is very important. Instead of gatekeeping women, instead of censoring women, we need to equip them with knowledge and capacity on how to navigate their presence online. That's from me.
So thanks, Dita and Kiao.
Um, I don't really have anything to add. You know, everyone said really important points for us to take away. But one thing, I don't know, this is just like my personal thing. What I'm thinking is, it is also important that the people here in the room also have a safe space for them. Like people who they can reach out to, who they can talk about these stuff. Is also really important, I think, because I mean, when you work on these issues, it also take a toll on your mental health as well. So I just hope that, the self-care is also important. And I hope that we, all of us, have a space to do that, to take care of ourselves and, have a safe space where we feel like we can, talk to, ask for support. Yeah, that's it. That's what I wanted to add.
Yeah, thanks, Kel. Definitely, we need a safe space, we need the support, and all the things that everyone mentioned. So I think it's about time for us to wrap up. We have actually discussed a lot of things, and there are still many issues that we perhaps should discuss, but we are constrained by time. I just hope that just like the pandemic, we can also develop some vaccine, not to stop gender-based violence, but maybe it's not possible. Yeah, before we end, I will give each of you a minute to say your last words, or maybe there is something that we forgot to mention, or if you want to plug something, announce an activity, etc. So yeah, anyone can start.
I'll do first.
Yes,
So
Tina.
yeah, FMA has now an ongoing campaign this for this 18-day campaign against online against gender-based violence. So we are highlighting different feminist principles in the internet. So the highlights of this social media cards are focused on the feminist response in relation to COVID-19. So you may wish to visit our Facebook page and other social media platforms and website if you want to know more about this campaign. And then there are a lot of online discussions happening around where FMA is part of. So please stay tuned. So and we will publish all the links. So maybe you can join if you have some time. Yeah, that's it.
So thanks, Tina. Darika, you have last words.
Yes, we know that we have a lot of things to do to address the online gender-based violence. And I mean that we hope that we can keep our conversation forward. And also, I mean, for the multi-stakeholder as well, because this issue is not just only one part that have to contribute for tech company. Maybe they need to think about, like, they talk about the privacy by design, but how about gender by design in terms of the authority as well? I think this issue is need unify in terms of the engagement and also the multi-stakeholder as well. And yeah, I think that's it. That is for me. Thank you.
I'll go next. I think this space is very important, and it's very rare that feminists from Southeast Asia would come together to unpack an issues. And I hope to have more of this, like a convening of, because I think I mean, regionally we have a lot more similarities as compared to other countries. So it's great, and I would really love to see this to grow, this network to grow even bigger. Yeah.
Kiao?
I don't have anything to add. I'm really happy to be here, to be talking about this. Thank you for having me here.
Thanks, Kiao. And Dita?
Yeah, well, I just want to say that we need to broaden these networks of feminists and the pro-feminists in moving forward this OGBV. But firstly, we need to, this is what I always say, that we need to see technology differently from now. It is not just tools for us, it is a space where we live in. And if we agree that this is the space we live in, then we need to take it back. We've been, pushed to the side and if like further year by year, time by time. So it's time for us to take it back. So if this technology is used to facilitate the online gender-based violence, then we need to use technology as well to deal with it, to end the online gender-based violence, to strengthen the solidarity, to move beyond the conversation and come up with solution, come up with formulation on how to end this together. And then also one announcement that I want to mention, that Purple Code Collective will be launching a series of pocket books on online gender-based violence on December 8th as part of this 16 days of activism. So if there are participants from Indonesia, please join us. And also we will also be launching a national task force on online gender-based violence also within this month. So that's it from me. And thank you everyone for being here. And then we will talk soon again.
Yeah, so I think the panelists have already said everything, and yeah, agree that we need, if the violence happens online, then let's take back that technology that made it possible for that violence to happen. And let's continue this conversation, and at the same time go beyond just conversation, but also let's have our continue our solidarity. Let's continue supporting each other. And it's great that we have this among us in Southeast Asia, because yeah, I agree with Serene that we have a lot of similarities. So well, we have gone beyond 5 o'clock. So I would like to thank all our participants who joined us in this room, and those who are watching us on Facebook. And thank you very much also to Janina, who provided the tech support. And we'd like, of course, to thank all our speakers, Dita, Serene, Kiao, Tina, Darika. Thank you so much for sharing all your insights, your experiences, for being brave in saying those things, because some people wouldn't say what you said, and it's very refreshing to hear all those things. So thank you very much, everyone, and we would like to thank to thank also the Henrik Ball Foundation for supporting this kind of discussion. And we hope that we can have more conversations like this. So for the participants, if there are other issues, gender issues that you would like us to discuss, please feel free to get in touch with us so we can have further discussion on these issues. So again, thank you everyone. It has been a very productive day listening to all of you. As we say in the Philippines, maraming salamat po.
Thanks, everyone. Happy weekend.
Are we meeting after this?
Sure. Where? But Serene is gone.
I start the live streaming.
Yes, please stop it. Thanks, Tina.